Hey, how are you doing? This is Brian James Shanley, and you are listening to episode number 5 of the playlist on my YouTube channel, which is entitled Brian James Shanley Raw. I want to apologize first and foremost that I've not been to you with new content in quite some time. In terms of my personal life, I've been to hell and back. Had to deal with a few things. Life gets in the way once in a while. And so that's why this YouTube channel has looked all but dead in recent memory. But justice delayed is not justice denied. And I am here ready to rip the mic in half in order to deal with some of the lies that ripple through the culture, particularly those things that have the ability to do harm to the unity of this country. And today, episode number 5 is entitled 3/5 of a Man. 3/5 of a man. No doubt, if you have been out in a social situation at a party, maybe you're sitting at a table, having a couple of cocktails, listening to some music, playing a card game or whatever, with the friends, eventually there's someone at the table who has an Afrocentric or a critical race theory type of view of not only U.S. and world history, but geopolitics and things of that nature. And eventually they say the phrase, how can I possibly be expected to participate in this society and in this system which views me as 3/5 of a man? And you wait for a second to see if they're making a funny. And they're not making a funny, they're deadly serious. Then you wait for another minute to hear them expound on it, i.e. tell you where they got their information, etc. And there is no expounding on it. And the reason there's no expounding on it or attempt to define it and document it is because they're under the assumption that everyone else at the table shares that view. And it's usually received as a given. And so I briefly wanted to examine that, demythologize a little bit of it, and hopefully shed a little bit of light on the issue, because it does come up, I would say, more often than it should. But let's at least talk about it. First of all, there's such a thing as righteous anger, okay? There are things about which we can become angry, and we have a right to be angry. As human beings made in the image and likeness of a just creator, whether we're red, yellow, black, white, whatever, whether we're rich or poor, fat or skinny, in a wheelchair, not in a wheelchair, whatever walk of life and whatever external appearance and race, creed, etc. that we come from, you can't eliminate the fact that we all share Adam and Eve as a common ancestor, Adam and Eve being made in the image and likeness of God, an essentially just being. It's part of our non-material makeup. We strive after, we aspire to justice. But we also are outraged when injustice takes place. It upsets us. It makes us angry. Okay? So the given that I will give is this. If it is true that the official position of the U.S. government is that a certain demographic, and in particular black Americans, are viewed as only 3/5 of a human being, if that's literally true, then yes, you have every right to be angry. Every right. And I'm right alongside angry. You know, if someone speaks to me or treats me or tries to define me as anything less than a human being, fully deserving of basic human rights that are conferred upon me by God, yes, the first instinct is to rebel and to try to revolt and to want to do harm to whatever system has cast me in that light. And it makes sense on its face. But even though there's such a thing as righteous anger, there's also a concept of being angry about something that doesn't exist. So, for example, if I got a phone call, one of my guys says, Brian, there's a leprechaun outside right now smashing the windows of your car. On its face, I'm angry. How dare that leprechaun smash the windows of my car? But once I learn through an examination of the facts and the evidence that the leprechaun doesn't even exist, and my windows are not being smashed, I got two choices. I can either remain angry, knowing that the subject about which I'm angry is not factually accurate, or I can conform my opinions, views, and emotions to the evidence that I can cease being angry about that particular thing. All right? And these are the choices that are going to be put before you. I just want to touch base on it, and then I'm going to be out of your hair. This is going to be a shorter video than my normal rants. Essentially, going back to the late 1700s, the debate, well, and just by way of forms of government. When I was a kid, they taught civics. Today, they teach social studies. It's not just a change in terminology, it's a change in curriculum and approach. And I'll cover that some other time. That deserves its own video, because what they're doing to children today is hideous. And it's a crime against children, and it's subversive against this country. But when I was a kid, they taught civics, okay? So we learned about forms of government, systems of government in high school, and we got credit for it. And I'll tell you, America has what's called a bicameral legislature. Don't let big words scare you. Bi, like bisexual, someone's into two. Bi means two. Bicycle, there's two wheels on the bike, okay? Bicameral means there are two houses which compose our legislature. There's the Senate. Our 50 states are equally represented in the Senate, as in each state gets 2 senators. There's 100 senators altogether, because each of the 50 states has 2 of them. So Minnesota will have as many as California, will have as many as Texas, will have as many as New York, okay? Everyone is equally represented in terms of the states, at least in the Senate. The House of Representatives is a different animal altogether, because your representation for your state is based on population. So if Minnesota has 5 million people, we get 8 representatives. If California has whatever, 10 million people or 20, whatever it is, they have a lot more representation. So if you want more representation in the Senate, and ultimately more electoral votes to weigh towards whatever party dominates your state, the best thing you can do is what? Inflate the statistics, you know, pad your numbers, so to speak. And to do that, you'll count anyone and everyone you can. Well, this is nothing new. So you go back to the 1700s, and the southern states, they decided the best way to maintain power, as in having the most electoral votes to get our presidents, and to have the most effect in the House of Representatives, which the representation being based on our population, is to have the greatest population possible when it comes to the census, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to count our citizens, our landowners, our non-landowners. We're also going to count the slaves. And so the northern states, they had a different philosophy as it relates to slavery. They said, you know what? We want one day to be able to have a vote that ends this hideous institution, this crime against God, this crime against humanity. Our country cannot be founded on this kind of blood, all right? This was vigorous debates. And the North said, the only way we're going to be able to do this, we cannot allow the slaves to be counted in the census, because then what's going to happen is the slave states are going to be overrepresented, and we're never going to have the vote that we need. So the North said, they came at the South and said, look, you want to talk about population, let's talk about the amount of money that your state has to pay in terms of tax levies to the federal government. And the southern states began, oh, we can't have that. Better not count the states. Better not count the slaves when it's going to be inconvenient to us, i.e. what kind of taxes we have to pay to the federal government. But when it's convenient to us, as in how many electoral votes represent our state and how many seats in the House of Representatives we have, we better count the slaves. So the North said, you can't have it both ways. Figure it out. We say you shouldn't count any of the slaves in the population, because they're thinking chess. They're thinking 4 moves from now. How do we get rid of the institution? Got to have the right vote. You can't let the South have the stranglehold forever, okay? So the South says we want to count every slave. So someone in the North suggested, let's count 3 out of every 4 slaves as one person. That was rejected. Then the South said, what about 1 out of every 2? That was rejected. They couldn't come to a compromise. Eventually, the place in the middle was 3/5. 3 out of every 5 slaves will equal 1 person as it relates to the census, as in the population of our state when we count it. Okay, so it was a compromise that was arrived at, the North fighting vigorously to have the door cracked open for a future vote in which we could get rid of this garbage, this horrible institution from our country. And so, obviously, as there were other amendments later, the 13th, the 14th, etc., that 3/5 ceased to apply as the principles that founded this country were applied to more and more people demographically. And then Supreme Court decisions would further interpret these amendments in a more lasting way. So it was a process, but as you can see, the official position of the U.S. government is not now and has never been, that black man is only 3/5 of a human being. That sounds intelligent when you're on your way to work and you look on the corner and the civil rights leader with his silly bow tie and his megaphone are saying, this country views just 3/5 of a man. It sounds energetic and it makes you want to get up and do something, but it's based on a lie. Either the guy on the corner doesn't know his history, which means he's ignorant, or he knows his history, but is willing to lie to manipulate your emotions, which means he's dishonest. So you're dealing with ignorant or dishonest. But then when you look past the civil rights leader on the corner with his bow tie and his megaphone, who's financing him to be standing there? That's the real question. Who's paying for his salary, his rent, etc., while he's standing there during the workday doing this? That is your real enemy, okay? And that is usually white Marxist liberals that are financing that individual, okay? So we have demythologized the 3/5 of a man phrase. The U.S. government does not view any human being as 3/5 of a man and has not. And it was had to do with representation, not somebody's ontology in their being, okay? And it ultimately, the greater purpose was trying to eliminate slavery. So that's where that historically comes from. If you've been taught anything else, you've been lied to. And so first question is, who lied to me and why? And then, since they've lied to me on this, what else have they lied to me about? If you have been edified by the contents of this little rant, I would like you to pray about whether or not God is laying it on your conscience to subscribe to this particular channel. There's something for everybody. I wouldn't mind if you liked this particular episode, maybe threw a comment down. I don't care if it's calling me ugly, whatever. You know, if you want to threaten me, whatever. Or if you say, hey, I never thought of it like this before. You've given me something to begin researching. I like those too. But as long as you're talking, I don't care what you're saying. Because in terms of computers and algorithms and stuff, it does help. So, and you say, why are only a finite number of people subscribing to this channel at this time? Because what I'm doing, it's twofold. Number one, I'm laying down content. Then number two, I'll begin the marketing campaign to let people know that I actually exist. So, but I don't want people to come to a YouTube channel where there's not content to chew on yet. So, just because I'm not heard of, you can say you knew about me before anyone else did, before I became a big deal, all right? So, that's the benefit you have of knowing me now. But in any event, I hope something was said that caused a light to go on and caused you to have the epiphany moment. Not everything that glitters is gold, and not everything that comes to you by your favorite person at the barber shop, sitting on the corner, or whatever, is factually accurate just because the person that said so is a nice person. Sometimes you got to dig and find the facts for yourself. And if you learn something that was a lie, sometimes you got to unlearn it. I will see you on the next episode. I've got so many things I want to cover that content is going to be cranked out fairly regularly. God bless and keep you and your families.